screening. This is a special Montreal premiere of the end of immigration. We have the filmmakers here. It's also a fundraiser for the Immigrant Workers Center. And we do have some people who are going to tell you about the IWC. I'm going to invite Joey and Valentine up first to say a few words about the Immigrant Workers Center. And then I'll invite the filmmakers up.
Immigrant Workers Center does work defending the rights of migrant and immigrant workers here in Montreal and in Quebec. The work that we do not only defends workers in precarious situations against programs that are basically attacks on workers in general, like the Temporary Foreign Worker Program, but it also provides a space and a venue for immigrant and migrant workers to organize for the fight back against the attacks of capital.
Thank you. And now Malcolm, Guy, and Marie Boti are going to introduce the film.
Thanks, Ezra. Thank you very much, Valentine. And I think we don't have much to add. That was a wonderful testimony, and it's stories like Valentine's that inspired us to start making this film back in 2008, when workers like Valentine and many others walked through the doors of the Immigrant Workers Center in Côte-de-Neige. And so we tried to look at it in the broader context, and we spoke with workers and organizers and other interested parties across Canada and internationally, and this is what we've made with it. It's called The End of Immigration, and I look forward to talking with you afterwards.
There are actions being taken. The Immigrant Workers Centers working with migrant workers themselves, at least here on a provincial level, for the provincial government to adopt certain progressive legislations which will help alleviate some of the problems that migrant workers face under this program. But I think it will take a concerted effort of a very strong, I guess, labor movement to overturn this program in general, and perhaps not just this program but beyond.
You know, at the international level, there are larger and larger alliances of migrant workers that are being formed, and just as the makers of the policies and so on are getting together in forums like the one that you saw there in Mexico, there's going to be one in November in the Philippines as it happens. And there again, there's going to be protests, and there's going to be counter, the other voice that will be heard there. So this is something that's, that we find is very important, because they're being challenged at the, international level. For example, at the ILO and other bodies, migrant workers such as domestic workers have taken their case and demanded that the work that they do be recognized as work, for example. And so that was, something, a major gain that was made. Also, the Commission des droits de la personne et des droits de la jeunesse here in Quebec put out a public statement calling this whole program discriminatory and racist, and asking that the Quebec government step in and change the parameters of it. So, there are gains being made, and certainly, one of the most important things, because I think all, justice-minded people, when they know about it, it's like, people are just not aware, and it's because it's come in under the radar. It has not been put on the table as a policy for, to be discussed before the elections or at any time. It's just been slowly taking place and having, on a wider and wider scale. So I think that it's important that just people be aware, they discuss it, and they say what they have to say about it.
I just wanted to say that what's really important, though, is that the workers themselves speak out, that they find that courage and their voice and organize. And I think we're beginning to see that. I think just the very fact that there are the testimonies on film, that they were willing to come out and say their stories and be documented is very powerful.
I hope the purpose of the film was definitely to to show the bravery and the strength and also the necessity of having these workers here, that they play a crucial role in our country, as they do in many countries around the world, right? The point that we wanted to make was that, I think my father was also surprised about this, is that it's virtually impossible for a working person today, like my father, let's say, someone who worked in a factory, didn't have a high education, but works honestly, works hard, works really well. It's virtually impossible for them to get into Canada today, except as a temporary foreign worker. So what we're saying is, good enough to work, good enough to stay, and we've seen that change over the last 50 years. So that was, and I think you agree with that, right? And you know, hopefully we can give the respect to those workers that they deserve.
So, in anyways, it was certainly not our intention to say that migrant workers are bad. On the contrary, it's that migrant workers should stay and not be migrants and not be sent back once they do their contract. That was the point of it. Well, traditionally, you know, immigration to Canada was, you know, between 1950 and 1960, when our parents came, the Canadian population grew by 30%, almost, you know, a third of an increase over 10 years. So it was a huge influx of people who came. And at that point, because the Immigration Act was only passed in 1962, so prior to that, there were, you know, it was always been focused on the needs of capitalist development in Canada, and it's always been, you know, very white-oriented because, you know, it's always been very racist because the idea is that you have to fit in to what Canada is and so on. So there's this thing that it has to be people who come from northern or, you know, European or countries, right? So that's always been there. That's not something new. But, you know, what we saw is that in those days, you came here, like our parents, they took whatever job, you know, they could get, and then, you know, we traveled around. My parents went across Canada looking for a better job all the time, and they were free to go wherever they could. It's not to say that that was easier, it was a happy-go-lucky thing. No, it was difficult. You uprooted and changing schools and changing, you know, towns all the time. But at least you were, you know, you had some kind of way of improving yourself or trying to improve yourself. The big difference here is now, under this program, people are not coming to Canada with access to the different employers or the different kinds of jobs or different types of occupations that you may have here. No, they come here on the bidding of one employer. Well, actually, maybe Valentine can talk about this, just exactly what it looks like. It's a very specific, you know, you are here with a visa to work for one particular employer in one location, and you can't change. You can't even go across the road, or you can't have a second job in the weekend or whatever, right?
Your indenture.
I think the idea is that public policy should be in the hands of the people for us to decide. Obviously, with a corrupt and system that doesn't work, it doesn't do that. But whatever say we had is now in the hands of corporations to say who can come in, who can stay in, who has to leave. And that's the privatization part of it. And that's what we need to oppose as a people, and to take back public policy in our hands and in the hands of the workers.
Well, just about the Live-in Caregiver program, we made 3 films prior to this one about the Live-in Caregiver program, so we're quite familiar with it. And we spent, we campaigned to denounce the racist and discriminatory nature of this program and so forth. But as you see in the film, we thought that was bad. Well, now we've got this. It's worse, you know. So, the thing is, luckily the workers have been organizing, and they have demands, and among which is that they not be forced to live in their employers' homes, that they be, given landed status earlier, not, like wait 2 or 3 years, and, that they have paid overtime and so forth and so on. So I think, it's just a matter of making sure, if we know cases, it's not a question of closing the door, because people need to leave their countries right now because they have no other choice. They can't survive in the conditions that they have now. And they're waging struggles in their own countries. There are movements there for fundamental change, but until that happens, people need to find other ways to survive, and among them is going abroad to work as live-in caregivers. So I think it's just, to make sure that, the Canadian laws change, that there's no discrimination, and that they're not bonded, they're not, indentured workers, but that they get full rights as soon as they can as landed residents.
What we've seen is the formation of a totally elitist immigration system. You could always buy your way into Canada, and you still can. So what we are seeing now is essentially when historically workers came in to Canada, and they were quite militant, and they came in and they formed unions. I remember my father, when he came in, he used to go to the factory and it said no Englishman may apply, because they knew the Englishmen like to form unions and stuff. Today what we've had is a shift in the class nature of the people we're letting in. I think that's the reality of it. And we're seeing more of the elites who are able to afford those plane tickets and those, thousands of dollars of fees and various other things get in. So it's really interesting, I think. Anyway, there's another film there somewhere, is the shift in our immigration, the class shift as well as the color shift in our immigration, and I think that's something we're going to see over the next little while. And I think in some way the Conservative government is playing upon that class shift and trying to work within those communities to essentially play on their perhaps small c conservatism that might exist among some of those elite migrants that are arriving here that can afford to pay their way in or buy their way in.